Okay, I know I'm not the first user on the internet to make a list of the toughest boss in each Final Fantasy game, but some of those other lists are a little bit iffy if you ask me. So today, I'm going to give you what I think is the hardest boss in every Final Fantasy game. Let me know if you think I've got it on the mark or not. And just to clarify, we're talking mainline Final Fantasy games only, so not sequels or spin-offs. But I am picking from the full range of bosses on offer, whether they be optional super bosses or actual story bosses. Final Fantasy I, War Mech. Most tough bosses in Final Fantasy are remembered for the strategy it takes to beat them, but in Final Fantasy I, the challenge starts before the battle even begins. War Mech is often called the series' first true super boss, and just finding it can be harder than some final bosses. With only a 1 in 64 chance of spawning, players have reported grinding for hours just to make it appear, and even then there's no guarantee you'll survive the encounter. War Mech often opens with a devastating preemptive strike that can cripple your party instantly, and its regular attacks hit just as hard. Add in huge defences against magic, and you've got a fight where going in unprepared almost always ends in disaster. War Mech isn't just rare, it's ruthless. Final Fantasy II, The Emperor. Final Fantasy II isn't exactly famous for its tough boss battles, but the Emperor is one of the few real exceptions. Unlike War Mech, this one isn't optional. He's the main antagonist, and you'll fight him more than once. The best way to bring him down is with the Blood Sword, but that weapon is both easily missable and not guaranteed to be in your arsenal. Without it, the fight gets messy fast. Not only do you have to survive his damage output, but you'll also have to push through his constant self-healing, which can undo minutes of progress in an instant. For an underleveled party, this fight borders on the impossible. Even for prepared players, it's less about flashy strategy and more about endurance, keeping your focus and chipping away until the Emperor finally goes down. Final Fantasy III, Iron Giant. Cloud of Darkness is already a brutal final boss in Final Fantasy III, especially in the Pixel remaster. But in the 3D remake, there's something even worse waiting: the Iron Giant. A familiar face across the series, this incarnation is by far the deadliest. As a post-game super boss, it comes loaded with absurd stats and near impenetrable defences. But don't think it's just a simple HP sponge. The Iron Giant can attack up to 4 times per turn, shredding even maxed out parties, and it only gets nastier as the fight drags on. Once its health drops below 65%, it starts spamming Swipe, an AoE attack that slams the whole party for around 4,000 damage. On top of that, it casually throws out Meteor for good measure. The result? A fight that turns into pure survival, and for many players, a rude awakening that Cloud of Darkness wasn't actually the peak challenge after all. Final Fantasy IV, Zeramus. Zeramus is the climactic final boss of Final Fantasy IV, and he doesn't waste time reminding you who's in charge. The fight begins with him completely invulnerable, forcing your party to endure while the story unfolds. Only after Cecil uses the crystal does Zeramus reveal his true form: stronger, nastier, and this time vulnerable to damage. But striking back comes with risks. Cast black magic or holy spells, and Zeramus loves to counter with devastating abilities like Flare. Worst of all, he has a signature move that Final Fantasy fans still shudder at: Big Bang, an attack capable of wiping out your entire party in one cast. Surviving Zeramus is less about clever tricks and more about weathering a relentless onslaught, the perfect finale for one of the series' most iconic stories. Final Fantasy V, Omega. There's no doubt that Exdeath is an intimidating final boss in Final Fantasy V, but I have to disagree with others who call him the game's toughest fight. Why? Because Omega exists. This machine is a super boss in every sense of the word, and it went on to inspire multiple incarnations across the franchise. In FF5, Omega even breaks the rules. Its level surpasses the player's own cap of 99, and with a 95% evasion rate, most of your physical attacks won't even connect. On top of that, it bombards you with a relentless mix of single target nukes, AoE damage, and crippling status effects. Beating Omega isn't about brute force, it requires a carefully planned party setup and near perfect execution. Some fans will still argue Neo X Death deserves the top spot as the hardest boss, but for me, Omega is the true ultimate test in Final Fantasy V. Final Fantasy VI, Brachiosaur. Kefka may be the iconic final boss of Final Fantasy VI, but if we're talking about sheer difficulty, I think the real crown belongs to Brachiosaur. Found in the dinosaur forest with a 1 in 16 chance of spawning, this enemy is nastier than the actual bosses in the game. The fight usually opens with disaster, inflicting a pile of status ailments right out of the gate, and from there it follows up with brutal physicals, a deadly spin attack and meteor. Worst of all, every fourth turn it has a chance to cast Ultima, which is almost always a guaranteed wipe unless you've got Re-Raise up or Celes is waiting with Runic. This isn't just a test of strength either, it's a race to kill the Brachiosaur before it kills you. The reward is worth it though. Rare relics like the Celestiad, ribbons, and a huge amount of experience and magic points. Some players will argue Kefka's final form deserves this spot, but for me, Brachiosaur is the real toughest encounter in Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy VII, Ruby Weapon. There's always been debate over whether Emerald or Ruby deserves the title of toughest boss in Final Fantasy VII. For me, the crown goes to Ruby. This fight throws so much at you. When Ruby's claws aren't buried in the ground, it's almost completely invulnerable and loves to punish you with nasty counterattacks. When the claws are in the ground, they unleash huge damage and drain your MP, grinding down even the best setups. And then there's Whirl Sand, an ability that can eject your party members permanently from the fight, sometimes leaving you stranded with a single character. Even with a solid strategy in place, so much can go wrong in this fight. But what about you? Which of the two do you think is tougher? Are you Team Emerald or Team Ruby? Let me know in the comments below. Final Fantasy VIII, Omega Weapon. The second Omega weapon on our list is also one of the nastiest, and in Final Fantasy VIII, it's almost certainly the hardest encounter in the game. The original PS1 version is especially brutal because Omega is locked at level 100, giving it over 1 million HP, more than anything else in Final Fantasy VIII, and more than any boss the series has thrown at players up until this point. To make matters worse, elemental damage actually heals it, instantly shutting down a lot of strategies. Its Megiddo Flame attack will one-shot any character who isn't fully healed and maxed out, while Terror Break is the kind of ability that makes you want to put the controller down. The one saving grace is that Omega's attacks follow a fixed rotation, so you can at least predict what's coming next. But when every move can utterly annihilate you, that's not much comfort. Some fans do argue Ultimecia deserves the title of hardest boss in FF8, but for me, Omega Weapon is the ultimate test of mastery. Before we move to the next entry, if you're enjoying the video, please do subscribe for more content, and you may be seeing a new YouTube feature called Hype. Go ahead and click that if you want to support my work, as at no cost to yourself, that gives us a bit of a healthy boost with the algorithm. Final Fantasy IX, Ozma. Ozma might just be the most frustrating boss on this entire list. No matter how skilled you are at Final Fantasy IX, there's a good chance you'll still lose here, because so much of the fight comes down to RNG. Unlike any other enemy in the game, Ozma doesn't follow a typical ATB gauge. Instead, almost everything it does is a counter to your own actions. On top of that, its attacks are widely unpredictable. One turn you might survive, the next it chains Curse into Meteor and wipes your entire party. The only reason I survived my last encounter was pure luck. Aiko's revive triggered at random, giving me a 1 in 4 chance to stay in the fight. Without luck like that, you're probably toast. Some players love Ozma as the ultimate challenge of 9, while others see it as pure unfairness. For me, it's both, maddeningly random, but unforgettable. Final Fantasy X, Penance. So Final Fantasy X is famous, or perhaps infamous, for its endgame super bosses. The Dark Aeons alone can keep you busy for days, but they all build up to one final challenge, Penance. With a colossal 12 million HP, this monster can drag battles out for 45 minutes or more. And that's after you've already sunk dozens of hours grinding your party to the insane stats needed just to stand a chance. Even then, the fight isn't easy. Penance hits with a devastating physical, crippling status effects, and Judgment Day, an attack capable of wiping your entire team instantly. With the right strategy, the fight can become somewhat predictable, but maintaining perfect focus for nearly an hour straight is a tall order for anyone. Some fans say the Dark Aeons are harder on a per fight basis, but for me, Penance is the definitive super boss of Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy XI, Absolute Virtue. Final Fantasy XI was the first MMO in the series, so not every fan has experienced its most notorious boss firsthand. But make no mistake, Absolute Virtue is quite possibly the toughest fight the franchise has ever seen, at least in its original form. Introduced in 2005, players quickly tried to bring it down, and by 2008, 3 years later, no one had succeeded. Whenever a group seemed close, Square Enix would actually step in and patch out their strategies, keeping the fight practically unbeatable. Absolute Virtue came armed with a vast arsenal of abilities, including Benediction, which could instantly restore its HP, making hours of progress vanish within seconds. It wasn't until years later, after the level cap was raised and the boss itself was nerfed, that players finally claimed victory. Some fans argue Pandemonium Warden was just as brutal, but for me, Absolute Virtue remains the most infamous wall in the entirety of Final Fantasy history. Final Fantasy XII, Trial Mode Stage 100. Final Fantasy XII got a major overhaul with the Zodiac Age, and with it came Trial Mode, a gauntlet of 100 back-to-back battles. Most fans point to Yesmat as the ultimate challenge in 12, and sure, with 50 million HP, that fight can drag on. But in my opinion, Yesmat is a cakewalk compared to Stage 100, The Judges. This battle is pure madness. So, setting the stage, you enter the fight already battered from Omega Mark 12 on Stage 99, and then are greeted by the judges unleashing everything they've got from the moment the fight begins. They work together like an MMO raid party, a tank soaking hits, a healer keeping them alive, buffers enhancing their strength, and DPS tearing you down from every angle. Abilities like Gabranth's Terror Break can shred your entire party in seconds if you slip up. It is relentless, chaotic, and for many players, Trial Mode ends right here, because Stage 100 isn't just tough, it's overwhelming. Some will argue Yesmat is the real ultimate test, but for me, nothing in 12 compares to the insanity of these judges. Final Fantasy XIII, Barthandelus. Even though Long Guri is perhaps the most grueling encounter in Final Fantasy XIII, I wouldn't necessarily call it the hardest. For me, that title goes to Barthandelus. And unlike Long Guri, this is a story boss you must beat in order to progress. You fight him 3 times throughout the game, and each encounter ramps up in difficulty. To stand a chance, you need a strong grasp of the paradigm system, knowing exactly how to shift roles and stack buffs and debuffs at the right moment. If you can't, you'll be crushed. Barthandelus also has some particularly nasty combos, like casting Thanastosian Laughter immediately into Ultima, which can wipe out your whole party in seconds. When 13 first released over a decade ago, plenty of players felt this fight was unfairly tuned for a mandatory boss battle. Some will still argue Long Guri deserves the spot as the toughest boss in 13, but I think Barthandalus earns it, because nothing slams the brakes on a playthrough harder than this fight. Final Fantasy XIV, the Omega Protocol. Final Fantasy XIV certainly has no shortage of brutal raids, but the hardest has to be the Omega Protocol. Introduced in Endwalker, this ultimate raid revisits the finale of the Omega series, but cranks the difficulty up to insane levels. The fight runs for over 20 minutes, is split into multiple phases, with each one being packed with mechanics where a single mistake means instant death. From Program Loop, which forces players to clear towers in strict order while dodging AoEs, to Hello World in the reconfigured Omega phase. The raid demands absolute precision and teamwork, and just when you think it's over, Alpha Omega arrives with attacks like Cosmo Meteor and Magic Number that require perfectly timed limit breaks just to survive. Even among Final Fantasy XIV's ultimate fights, this has a reputation for being one of the most technically demanding encounters ever designed. Some players still point to Dragon Song's reprise as the hardest, but I think the Omega Protocol is the pinnacle of 14's raid challenges. Final Fantasy XV Omega. Yup, Omega makes another appearance, and in Final Fantasy XV, it's one of the nastiest challenges in the game. Found in the Insomnia Ruins, this super boss unleashes absurd damage and shrugs off even top-tier endgame equipment. Defensive armour? Don't even bother. Omega hits so hard that blocking or tanking simply isn't an option. Instead, survival comes down to positioning and dodging its attacks, especially its devastating death ray, which can annihilate the party in seconds. Even the best prepared groups can be wiped out before they knew what hit them. If you do manage to bring Omega down, you are rewarded with the rare metal accessory, a powerful item that boosts Noctis' strength at a cost. Some players still point to Adamantoise as 15's biggest fight, but that's more spectacle than difficulty. Omega is the real final test of skill in Final Fantasy XV. Final Fantasy XVI Ultima. Clive faces plenty of challenges across Final Fantasy XVI, but the toughest is saved for last. Ultima is a grueling, multi-phase battle where one mistake can end your run instantly. Many of its abilities, from Ultima itself to punishing AoEs such as Light Wave, will one-shot you if you do not react perfectly. The real test though is endurance. This is not a short fight. Ultima constantly shifts forms, layering new mechanics and forcing you to stay sharp throughout a marathon of phases. And if you slip up at any point, you are sent right back to the start of the sequence. For a story boss, it's horrific, a finale that easily ranks among the hardest battles in the entire franchise. Some players argue the Chronolith trials are technically tougher, but for me, Ultima is the ultimate test of skill and focus in Final Fantasy XVI. And so folks, do you agree with my list or do you disagree? Did I get this right or did I fluff it up completely? Please do share your own thoughts, perhaps your own list, down in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed the ranking and I'll catch you next time.